I stood on my own porch, the key still warm in my palm, as the lock refused to turn. Inside, I could hear laughter, Brittany's laugh, light, rehearsed, unmistakably triumphant. My hydrangeas framed the doorway I'd once painted by hand. My swing creaked beneath someone else's throw blanket. And there, taped neatly to the window, a note in Ethan's handwriting. Please respect our space. Our. After decades of holidays, of scraped knees and piano recitals, of burying his father alone, I was no longer welcome. I was no longer mother. Just someone who used to have a name here. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The light from the screen lit up my cheekbones like a spotlight, cruel and cold. Margot Wells sat alone at her breakfast nook, the morning sun slicing through the stained glass window behind her. Her tea had gone cold. She hadn't touched the slice of toast on her floral china. Instead, her thumb hovered, motionless, above the glowing screen of her phone. There they were. Ethan, Brittany, and the kids, posed in front of the wraparound porch of her Tybee Island house, the old shingles salt-bleached and charming behind them like something out of a southern living spread. Brittany had arranged everyone by height and coordinated them in airy linen, barefoot on the weathered wood steps. The caption beneath the photo read, "Just us this year. Peace. Finally. Yarch blessed. Yarch family. First. Kach coastal cation." Margot's lungs stalled. The words wrapped around her like fishing wire. Tight, invisible, sharp. Just us. She blinked, staring at the image as if it might vanish. The rocking chairs on the porch. Her husband had picked those out from a craftsman in Charleston. The blue hydrangeas in the planters. Margot had planted those herself, with Ethan at age 10 digging the holes and asking endless questions about roots and resilience. Now she saw her heirloom porch swing draped with a gauzy throw that hadn't belonged there yesterday. The silver wind chime she'd hung herself had been moved, replaced with something. Plastic? No. Worse. Whitewashed metal shaped like a flamingo. Her thumb shook slightly as she scrolled again. Another post. A video this time. Brittany was giving a beach house tour, her chirpy influencer voice narrating as the camera floated from the foyer to the sunroom. "This space just feels like a sanctuary," she cooed. "It's really become our second home." Second home. As if it hadn't been Margot's first. And Ethan, where was his voice? Not a single clip showed him saying a word, just him nodding, smiling faintly, following Brittany's lead like a buoy tethered too tightly. Margot set the phone down gently on the table. Her knuckles had gone white, her breath, slow and controlled, but shallow. Then came the voice that didn't ask but knew. "You saw it, didn't you?" Viola Harris stood in the doorway, holding a bakery box and wearing her usual scowl of judgment and curiosity. Her sunglasses were still perched in her hair. She didn't wait for an answer before setting the box down and peeling the lid back. "Cinnamon muffins," she said. "Hot as hell in my car, but worth it." Margot didn't speak. Her hands lay still on the table, palms down, fingers slightly curled like she might reach for something, anything, that made sense. Viola glanced at the phone, then back at her. "Well, damn," she muttered. "They didn't even pretend this time." Margot finally turned her head, slowly. "They're at the house." "I saw. Brittany's got the kids in matching swimsuits. Looks like a damn catalog shoot. No call, no text. Nothing." Viola sat down and tore a muffin in half. "Ethan didn't even give you a heads up?" Margot shook her head, once like she was trying to flick off a drop of water. "Not a word." Viola bit into the muffin. "I'd say I'm surprised, but I'd be lying through my capped teeth." Margot didn't answer. She picked up the phone again, stared at the screen. Her reflection stared back, soft gray hair perfectly pinned, lipstick faintly smudged, and behind her eyes, a slow-burning fury building like a tide against a seawall. There was a time when the family wouldn't have dreamed of going without her. When the house was filled with voices and piano music and holiday meals that stretched across 2 tables. When Ethan was the kind of boy who triple-checked his mother's birthday was properly celebrated. When Brittany smiled tightly but still made space. When Margot was still grandma instead of her. Viola sipped her coffee and said nothing else. She knew better. She'd seen that expression before. Years ago, in the probate courtroom when Margot stood up to a cousin who tried to steal their grandfather's land. It was the same expression now. Margot stood slowly, picked up her phone. Her hands didn't shake this time. She didn't say anything to Viola. She simply turned. Walked up the staircase, every creak in the old floorboards a little louder than usual, and disappeared down the hallway. Viola called up after her. "Where you going?" Margot's voice came from somewhere distant, steady and cool as a winter tide. "To find a document I never thought I'd need again." Some silences are polite, others are surgical. Margot sat at her writing desk beneath the upstairs window, a place that usually smelled faintly of lavender polish and ink. The afternoon light had grown heavier now, thick with humidity and the scent of blooming camellias outside. A lace curtain stirred in the faint breeze. Her phone lay on the desk like an unwelcome guest. She typed the message once, deleted it, then typed again. "Is everything all right?" The period at the end felt too sharp, so she erased it, let the question stand alone. She read it twice before pressing send. The screen blinked, delivered. Nothing more. Downstairs, Viola's voice floated up, muffled through the floorboards. "You want me to make fresh coffee, or are we pretending we still drink tea around here?" Margot didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the screen. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. Minutes stretched into 10, then 20. Her phone buzzed once, soft and almost apologetic. She reached for it. "Brittany Wells. We just needed family time, hope you understand." No hi, no greeting, no mention of Ethan. Just that syrupy tone, so carefully curated as if she were writing to a follower, not a mother-in-law. Margot's hand stayed frozen around the phone. Her tea from earlier still sat untouched beside her, the surface reflecting her face in rippling fragments. She whispered, "Family time." The words caught halfway out, dry and bitter. Downstairs, Viola called again. "You alive up there? Or did the ghost of Southern Grace finally get you?" Margot walked down with her phone in hand, her steps measured. Viola was perched on the settee, coffee mug balanced on one knee. When Margot wordlessly handed her the phone, Viola adjusted her glasses, read the message, and immediately snorted so hard she nearly inhaled her drink. "Oh, she did not." Viola coughed into her hand, eyes wide with disgusted amusement. "She really sent that?" Lord, she could weaponize emojis. "She did," Margot said quietly. "Hope you understand. I hate when people do that. It's the kind of thing you say right after you stab somebody in the back and offer them a Band-Aid." Margot didn't smile. "Ethan didn't write it." "No, he didn't." Viola's tone softened. "He never does." Margot took her phone back and looked at the last thread of texts. Months of half-hearted check-ins, photos of the grandkids sent without captions, one-sided questions she'd stopped asking. She turned toward the staircase again. "I need to check something." "Check what?" "The past." Viola blinked. "Should I be worried?" "Not yet." The stairs complained under her as she climbed again. The house was old, filled with the hum of time, clocks ticking, floorboards settling, ghosts of conversations lingering in the corners. She reached the attic door and tugged the pull cord. The ladder creaked down, releasing a breath of warm, dusty air. Margot climbed carefully, the wood soft under her bare feet. The attic smelled of cedar and paper. Afternoon sunlight sliced through the single round window, catching on the edges of stacked boxes labeled in her late husband's handwriting, Summer 1989, Tax Docs, Ty B. That last one? She knelt beside it. Inside, neatly stacked envelopes and a thick navy blue binder with gold lettering. Property and deeds. Wells family. Dust clung to her fingertips as she opened it. There it was. Page after page of notarized signatures, land surveys, correspondence from her husband's old attorney. At the back, pressed under a sheet protector, the original deed to the Tybee Island house. Her name alone. Margot Elise Wells, sole owner. She traced the embossed seal with her thumb. For a moment, something inside her steadied, a quiet affirmation that she hadn't imagined her place, her authority, her history. It had just been rewritten without her consent. Her phone buzzed again. She looked down, half expecting Ethan's name, but it wasn't him. A notification. Brittany Wells posted a new story. Curiosity flickered like a spark. She opened it. The video showed Brittany holding a glass of wine on the porch swing, smiling into the camera. Finally, peace and quiet, she said. Sometimes you just have to protect your energy. The phone slipped slightly in Margot's hand, and she gripped it tighter before it fell. Her pulse quickened, not from shock this time, but something colder, cleaner. Below, Viola's voice echoed faintly. Margot, everything okay up there? Margot closed the binder slowly, her gaze still on the glowing screen. Everything's perfectly fine, she said, though her tone carried steel. Then she slid the deed into a leather folder and stood up, her silhouette framed against the attic window. The tide had shifted. Some people steal with their hands, others do it with hashtags. Margot sat on the edge of her tufted settee, a leather folder still balanced on her lap like a shield. Viola had gone quiet for once, planted stiffly in the armchair across from her, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. The room was thick with the scent of old jasmine, warm dust, and something less tangible. Betrayal, maybe. Margot opened Instagram again. The screen lit up with another reel. Brittany's smiling face, filtered, glowing, the Tybee Island sun casting golden halos around her blonde bun as she flitted from room to room. Margot tapped the audio icon. Some tinkling ukulele music played underneath Brittany's chipper voice. Hey friends, welcome back to our little slice of peace, she chirped, swinging the camera through the front foyer. We've been so grateful to just breathe here this week. It's our sanctuary. Farce, our sanctuary. Coastal life. Family, legacy. Blessed, not stressed. Margot's nostrils flared. The camera panned across the sitting room. Brittany had swapped the lace runners for burlap. Replaced Margot's blue and white porcelain bowl, an antique from her grandmother, with a cheap faux wood tray filled with air plants. The hydrangeas were gone. The reel continued. So this week, I decided to restyle this little corner. These vases were so old school. I needed something lighter. Margot leaned forward, heart clenching as Brittany's perfectly manicured hands lifted one of her Waterford crystal vases from the display cabinet and repositioned it next to a modern monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a discount home goods aisle. You don't rearrange another woman's soul, Margot muttered under her breath. What? Viola asked sharply. Margot didn't answer. She scrolled to the comments. Costa Living Queen. OMG, this is so dreamy. Is this your house? Mama's Woo Vacation. Goals. I need this piece in my life. Sunnywright Studio. Did you design this yourself? Your taste is flawless. And there, liked by Brittany herself, a comment from a verified interior design blogger. You've really made this place yours. That energy shows. Viola leaned over, squinting at the screen, her jaw flexed once. No, she said flatly. No, ma'am. I've held my tongue for 2 decades. But that right there? That's war. Margot didn't speak. Her silence wasn't shock anymore. It was concentration. Viola stood and began pacing in front of the fireplace. She's got strangers thinking it's her house. She's branding it. Like it's some influencer Airbnb. What's next? Monogram towels? Margot exhaled slowly, as though deflating something in her chest. She's stealing from a living woman. That's what I'm saying. Viola turned. You still have Noah's number, right? Margot didn't answer. She already had the drawer open. Inside, neatly filed and labeled in her cursive, was a slim Rolodex box. Her fingers flicked past names of bridge partners, garden club secretaries, a retired estate planner, and then, nestled between Jordan, mayor's office, and Nolan, antiques appraiser, she found it. Noah James, real estate law. She pulled the card free, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the corners sharp. He'd sent it the year her husband died, a quiet gesture. If you ever need anything, he'd said then, I'll always answer your call. Margot reached for her landline, the same one Brittany had once mocked as so retro. Viola cocked an eyebrow. You calling now? Margot nodded. Before she stages a damn cooking show in my kitchen. The phone rang twice before a calm, deep voice answered. Noah James. Noah, it's Margot Wells. A beat, then, Mrs. Wells, what can I do for you? She looked out the window as a pair of sparrows flitted across the garden. Her voice didn't shake. I have a boundary problem, and I believe you specialize in property lines. Noah was quiet for half a second. Then warmly, I certainly do. Margot smiled faintly. Good. Because someone's made themselves at home in a place they were only ever invited to. Viola, arms crossed, mouthed, Damn right. Can you meet tomorrow? Margot asked. I'll clear the morning. Bring whatever documentation you have. Margot hung up. She didn't sit back down. She moved to the coat rack and took down her summer trench, slipping it on with practiced ease. Viola blinked. Where are you going? To dust off more than just that binder. She turned, gave one last glance at the reel still playing on her phone. Brittany smiled into the lens, tilting her wineglass. Here's to protecting your peace, friends. Margot's eyes narrowed, her voice quiet but full of certainty. Let's see how peaceful she feels when the locks change. There's a different kind of silence in a lawyer's office. One that doesn't ask for peace, only proof. Margot stepped into Noah James's office just after 9 a.m., her heels echoing softly on the honey-colored hardwood floors. The building was tucked neatly between a historic bookstore and a florist on East Broughton Street. The brass placard on the front door so polished it caught the morning sun like a blade. Noah met her in the lobby, dressed in a crisp navy suit that hadn't changed much since the days he'd sat at her dinner table in high school, nervous before cotillion. Mrs. Wells, he said with that old-fashioned warmth that made it feel like she still mattered in a world that had begun to move too fast and forget too easily. Noah, she said with a nod, pressing the leather folder into his hand like a sealed fate. His office was cool and quiet, anchored by deep green walls and a mahogany desk that smelled faintly of lemon oil and old books. A pair of framed diplomas hung behind him, balanced by a vintage map of Chatham County, every parcel and shoreline etched in sepia ink. Noah opened the folder slowly, laying out the deed, the supporting documents, the surveys with Margot's neat annotations in pencil. His fingers moved with the kind of reverence usually reserved for family Bibles and death certificates. He read for a few minutes in silence. Then, with a small nod, Your sole owner. No caveats, no shared interest, no leasehold rights granted to anyone else. Margot clasped her hands in her lap. I never gave them permission to live there. They were guests. Sometimes. always invited. Until now. Noah raised an eyebrow. And you've never signed anything granting them residency, tenancy, or long-term access? Never. Not even a spare key copy without me watching. Noah leaned back slightly. Then legally speaking, they're not occupants. They're unauthorized users. Margot inhaled through her nose. The phrase tasted like justice. He pulled a blank form from a side drawer and began filling it in, the rhythm of his pen swift but exact. This will be a formal notice of trespass and revocation of access. You'll sign it. I'll notarize it. Then we'll send it by certified mail, digital delivery, and, if you'd like, a hand-delivered copy at the premises. Margot tilted her chin slightly. I'd like them to read it in my handwriting first. Noah paused, smiled faintly. Old school. I respect it. She took the form and filled in her section with deliberate care, her cursive flowing like the ink itself carried weight. Once they receive this, Noah said, any refusal to vacate becomes a legal liability. And if they damage anything? Civil claim territory. Good, Margot said softly, sealing the document shut with a flick of her fingers. Noah gathered the papers into a new folder with his firm's watermark and slid it across the table to her. I'll initiate the digital notices now. You may want to give Ethan a heads up. Even if he's avoiding you, it's courteous. Margot stood. Courtesy is a two-way street, and Ethan hasn't walked it in months. Still, as she stepped out onto the brick sidewalk and into the hazy Savannah morning, she pulled out her phone. The light stung her eyes. Maybe it was the brightness. Maybe it was something else. She opened her texts. Typed. Call me before noon. It's urgent. She didn't say hi. She didn't use his name. And she didn't add a single emoji. Then she waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. She walked the block twice. Bought a sweet tea she didn't want. Watched the people stroll past. The college students in sandals, the dog walkers with coffee, the tourists clutching sun hats and maps. Her phone remained still in her palm. Viola called once, checking in, but Margot didn't answer. Not yet. Her focus had narrowed to a single question. Would he call? By 11:43 a.m., she had her answer. He wouldn't. She tucked the phone back in her purse and looked down at the envelope Noah had given her. Inside was the notice. The law. Her voice. Written in formal language. She stepped off the curb and headed toward her car. The locks were going to change. But something deeper had already shifted. Major twist number 1. Some reckonings knock. Others turn the key and walk in like they never left. The ride out to Tybee was silent for the first 10 minutes. Not tense. Contained. Like a fuse had been lit, and both passengers knew it. Noah's car, a deep green vintage Mercedes, hummed along the coast highway as the marshes opened up in waves of gold and silver on either side. Margot sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, the legal envelope tucked between her feet. Her pearl earrings caught the light every time the trees shifted overhead. You sure you want to deliver this yourself? Noah finally asked, eyes steady on the road. I didn't come this far to let an email do my talking, she said, voice smooth. He nodded once, like he expected nothing less. When they turned onto the gravel drive of the Tybee house, the tires crunched like a warning. The hydrangeas were overwatered, drooping unnaturally, and a tacky string of solar lanterns had been looped around the porch columns. Brittany's white Lexus SUV sat proudly in the driveway like it had staked a claim. Noah put the car in park and looked at her. You don't have to say much. The document does all the talking. Margot opened the door. Good. I've already said too much by staying quiet this long. They stepped out together. The ocean breeze carried the faint sound of gulls and the sweetness of pluff mud, thick and earthy. Margot climbed the front steps slowly, one hand brushing the porch rail she'd sanded and painted herself 20 years ago. She didn't knock. The door opened before she reached it. Ethan. He wore a faded Georgia Tech shirt, barefoot, a half-startled, half-wilted expression across his face. "Mom?" Margot didn't flinch. "I texted you." "I—" he started, then glanced behind him as if trying to gauge how much trouble was already in the room. She handed him the envelope. "Effective immediately," she said, calm but cutting. "You're trespassing." Ethan blinked at the document like it was in a foreign language. "Wait, what is this?" Brittany's voice sliced through the moment like glass. "Excuse me?" She appeared in the hallway, wearing one of Margot's linen wraps, stolen from the guest closet, and holding a glass of white wine. Her smile was the kind designed to wound. "You can't do this," she snapped. "You can't just show up here with some paper and act like you're the law." Noah stepped forward. "Actually," he said gently, "I am the law, or at least the part of it that gets enforced." Brittany scoffed. "This house has been part of our family for years. We've maintained it. We've decorated it with discount burlap and made Instagram reels without consent," Margot said, voice steady. "Tell that to a judge." Ethan was reading the document now, his brows drawn together in confusion and shame. "This says we have 24 hours to vacate." Noah nodded. "That's generous, frankly. There's no lease, no standing rights. The owner," he gestured to Margot, "is revoking access effective today." "But we're family," Brittany said, stepping forward, her voice suddenly lower, more performative. "This is cruel. Think about the children." Margot turned her gaze on her. "I am thinking about the children. That's why I'm not calling the sheriff." A long silence fell between them. The sea breeze lifted Brittany's hair slightly. Ethan looked between the two women, caught like driftwood between rocks. Then Margot took one step forward, heels clicking. She pointed down the porch steps. "Go pack." Brittany didn't move. "Now." There was no yelling, no storm of emotions, just the quiet authority of a woman who had raised a boy and buried a husband and survived enough southern summers to know that rot, if left unchecked, spreads. Brittany hesitated another beat, then turned on her heel and stormed back inside. Ethan stayed behind, lips parted like he wanted to say something, anything, but couldn't seem to find a sentence that didn't collapse under its own weight. Margot looked at him, eyes clear. "You let her turn a family home into a stage. I'm pulling the curtain." He nodded, almost imperceptibly, then followed his wife inside. Noah exhaled beside her. "You sure about this?" Margot didn't answer right away. She turned and looked out over the dunes, the tips of sea oats waving like a congregation. "I've never been sure," she said. Behind her, the screen door slammed. Some women weaponize tears. Others wear them like armor. Margot had stopped doing either. The wicker baskets clattered onto the porch boards one by one, shoes, swimsuits, tangled chargers, and 2 unopened bottles of wine. Brittany stood in the middle of the mess, her face blotchy and her sobs loud enough to draw a pair of seagulls from the rooftop. Her sunglasses hung crooked on her head. Her mascara had lost the fight. But Margot? Margot stood at the top of the steps, arms crossed, her gaze cool and level. "I hope you're happy," Brittany choked, hurling a rolled towel toward a duffel bag like it had betrayed her too. "Just ripping everything away like this? Without even a conversation?" Ethan hovered nearby, carrying a stack of beach toys like they might shield him from the fallout. His shoulders hunched, eyes low. "Britt, maybe let's just pack quietly, okay?" he murmured. Brittany whirled around. "Don't you dare take that tone with me, Ethan. You said we were safe here. You said—" Her voice broke again. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth like it might catch everything falling apart. A small voice came from the doorway. "Mommy, why are we leaving?" Both children stood there barefoot, sun-kissed and confused. The little one clutched a conch shell. Ethan looked toward them, face pale. "We're just heading home early, sweetheart." Brittany turned sharply, tears still glistening. "Tell them the truth, Ethan. Tell them your mother kicked us out." Margot still hadn't moved. She watched the scene play out like a stage rehearsal she'd already seen a dozen times. Brittany wasn't crying for the kids. She wasn't crying for Ethan. She was crying for the camera that wasn't rolling. The old wood screen door creaked again. This time, it wasn't a family member stepping out. It was Viola. Her candy apple red convertible had just rumbled into the driveway, top down, lemonades in the cup holders. She stood now with two sweating glasses in hand, sunglasses tilted down her nose, the very picture of southern heat and zero patience. "Well," she said, surveying the luggage carnage, "looks like I missed the tantrum but made it in time for the mop-up." Brittany blinked at her, momentarily stunned. Viola handed one lemonade to Margot and took a slow sip of her own. Margot accepted it without a word. Her lipstick didn't smudge. "You're enjoying this," Brittany spat. Viola widened her eyes with mock innocence. "Oh, honey, loving it." She leaned in. "You know what you remind me of? A cat that clawed up the curtains and then cried when it got thrown off the couch." Brittany looked to Ethan for backup, but he was busy zipping up a duffel, face turned away. "You've ruined this family," Brittany snapped at Margot. Margot finally looked at her, eyes steady. "You tried that first." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. Brittany's lip quivered, but no more sound came. The kids shuffled awkwardly behind her, still holding their seashells and questions. "Let's go," Ethan muttered, almost to himself. He reached for the suitcase handle. Brittany didn't follow. She just stood there, swaying slightly, still waiting for something. Pity, a reversal, a hug, goodbye. None came. Margot took another sip of her lemonade. Viola watched the car get loaded with all the entitled chaos of a summer fantasy ending too soon. Just before they pulled out, Brittany rolled the window down. Her eyes locked on Margot's, wet and gleaming. "This isn't over." Margot gave the faintest nod. "No, it's not." And as the car backed down the gravel drive, leaving a swirl of dust and the smell of heated rubber, Margot turned toward Viola. "She'll fight dirty," Viola said, already knowing what came next. "Then we'll fight smarter," Margot answered, her voice like the tide, steady, inescapable. Behind them, the porch sat quiet again, except for one thing: Margot's heirloom vase, still out of place on the side table. She walked over, lifted it gently, and placed it exactly where it belonged. Some lies are spoken, the worst ones are filed in ink. Margot sat across from Noah in his office again, the same lemon oil scent in the air, but the mood tighter now, like a stretched wire humming between them. He had a manila folder open in front of him, his brow furrowed as he slid a photocopy across the desk without a word. Margot adjusted her reading glasses. The paper looked official, Chatham County letterhead, a clerk's stamp in the corner. At first glance, it seemed legitimate, and then she saw the signature, her name. Sort of. The curves of the M were all wrong, the spacing between her first and middle name too tight. The tail of the W in Wells didn't trail like hers always did. It ended abruptly, like someone had gotten nervous halfway through. "What am I looking at?" she asked, voice razor thin. Noah leaned back in his chair. "It was flagged by the records clerk, Kylie Brooks. She's sharp. Told me Brittany tried to file it last week. Claimed it was a revised deed granting joint usage rights for the Tybee house." Margot stared at the document again. Her throat went dry. "She forged my signature," she said. Noah nodded slowly. "Badly. But if Kylie hadn't caught it, it might have slipped through." Margot took a long breath, Her fingers curled tight around the edge of her purse. Why now? After everything. Why this? She knew she was losing ground, Noah said. She panicked. Thought paper could give her what marriage couldn't. The room went still, except for the rhythmic ticking of the antique desk clock. It reminded Margot of the one her husband had kept in the den, always 5 minutes fast on purpose. Noah slid the folder back toward himself. I'm drafting a formal fraud complaint. We'll file by end of week. I want her charged, Margot said. She will be, if it sticks. Forging a deed isn't just unethical, it's a felony. Margot stood slowly. Good. Let her cry her way out of that. Noah gave a dry smile. You want me to handle everything? I want it handled correctly, she replied. I'm going to visit my family attorney too. Can't hurt to have both barrels loaded. As she walked out of his office, Margot's shoes echoed louder than they had the last time. She wasn't rattled. She wasn't afraid. She was awake now, in a way she hadn't been in years. Downtown Savannah buzzed outside, tourists shuffling past with ice cream cones, students lounging under Spanish moss. But Margot's steps didn't slow until she reached the law firm her family had used for 2 generations. Inside, the waiting room smelled like leather and old money. She didn't need an appointment. They knew her. An hour later, she left with a second folder. More signatures, more safeguards. And still, no call from Ethan. Not a text. Not even a read receipt from the message she'd sent that morning. She paused outside the courthouse on her walk back to the car, staring up at its wide stone face. She'd walked these steps once as a newlywed to file her marriage license. Again as a young widow to file her husband's will. She hadn't expected to come back for her own son. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Margot Wells. A woman's voice. Sharp. Familiar. Hi, this is Kylie Brooks from the county clerk's office. Just wanted to let you know. I overheard Brittany trying to resubmit the forged deed again this morning. Different date. Same fake signature. Margot's spine straightened. And? Kylie let out a humorless laugh. And I shut it down personally. Just thought you'd want to know she's not done trying. Margot glanced up at the building behind her. No, she said. She's not. She hung up, then stood there a moment longer, letting the full weight of it settle in her chest. Brittany wasn't just playing games anymore. She was escalating. And Ethan? Still silent. Some betrayals whisper. This one had a checkout calendar and a Book Now button. Margot was sitting on her sun porch, a fresh legal folder in her lap, when the call came through. The early evening light filtered in through the white slats of the shutters, casting calm, orderly lines across the wicker rug beneath her feet. Viola was thumbing through a Charleston home magazine nearby, humming along to something Motown. Margot answered on the first ring. Kylie? Just when I think she can't surprise me, came the dry reply. You got a second? Go ahead. I ran a quick search after our last call, just out of curiosity, Kylie continued. And guess what popped up on Airbnb under a host named Wells Family Retreat? Margot didn't speak. Her heart was steady. Her hands weren't. She's listed your beach house, Kylie said. 3-night minimum, $480 a night. Booking open starting next month. And just wait till you see the photos. I assume you screenshotted them? Already sent. Check your inbox. Margot ended the call, opened her email, and tapped the first attachment. There it was. A professionally lit photo of her bedroom. The 4-poster rice bed she'd inherited from her grandmother. Her coral-stitched quilt folded just so. Even the antique writing desk by the window still holding her brass lamp. Brittany had left the books on the nightstand, too. Margot's books. A first edition Eudora Welty, and a dog-eared copy of The Art of Southern Hospitality. Jesus, she whispered. Viola looked up. What is it? Margot handed her the phone. Viola scrolled through the listing like she was rifling through someone else's laundry. "Welcome to our co-owned family coastal gem," Viola read aloud, voice going dangerously high. "Lovingly cared for by a second-generation Southern couple with deep roots in hospitality." Margot raised an eyebrow. "Second-generation Southern couple?" Viola laughed once, sharp and incredulous. "She makes it sound like y'all honeymooned here together." Margot took the phone back, her fingers suddenly cold. She tapped through the gallery. Photos of the guest room, her monogrammed linen towels folded into fans. The sunroom, where Brittany had draped one of her influencer throws across Margot's reading chair like it was hers to claim. Viola shook her head. "I swear, I am one Pilates class away from losing my last nerve." Margot rose. She moved with slow precision, crossing to her printer cabinet and booting it up. "We're printing everything." "Damn right we are." Screenshot, print. Screenshot, print. Listing description, host name, guest reviews from Brittany's other rentals, even the calendar showing the first booking scheduled for June 8th. "She doesn't think you'll move fast enough to stop her," Viola said. "She thinks this is just another old lady line you won't cross." She's wrong. By the time the last sheet rolled out, Margot's desk was covered in evidence. She slipped everything into a fresh binder, labeled it Wells v. Brittany, property fraud in block letters, then texted Noah. "Need to file injunction, urgent, Airbnb listing, all proof printed, can meet tonight." His reply came within 2 minutes. "Come by, I'll make time." They drove in silence again, this time with Viola riding shotgun, chewing cinnamon gum like it was laced with caffeine. Noah opened the door in shirt sleeves, his tie already loosened. His office lights glowed warm against the deepening blue of early evening. Margot handed him the binder like it weighed something. "She's turning my home into income," she said, "without permission, without ownership, with my sheets still on the bed." Noah flipped through page by page. "This is more than enough." Viola leaned against a bookshelf. "File whatever you need to file, counselor, and make it sting." Noah didn't smile. "Emergency injunction goes out first thing in the morning. Judge should grant a temporary block on all activity and will follow with a cease and desist to Airbnb directly. They take fraud seriously." Margot sat, crossing her legs. "So do I." As Noah turned to his computer, Margot's phone buzzed once. "Ethan." Finally. She opened the message. "Don't escalate this. It'll ruin everything. Just that." "No. Hi. Mom." No apology, no acknowledgement of Brittany's forgery, or the listing, or the lies. She stared at the screen, then slowly placed the phone face down on the table. "Noah," she said, her voice like ice in a crystal tumbler. "Yes?" "Add his name to the injunction." Major twist emerged too. Some women collect seashells at the beach. Brittany collected screenshots, lies, and bad timing. Airbnb's compliance team responded faster than Margot expected. The email landed in her inbox just after lunch. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. The listing under Wells Family Retreat has been permanently removed for violation of platform policies and misrepresentation of ownership. No bookings will be processed. Airbnb Legal Department." The screen glowed soft and final. Viola leaned over her shoulder and let out a low whistle. "Well, there goes her side hustle." "She never had a side," Margot replied, closing the laptop. "She had a camera and nerve." That afternoon, Margot drove out to Tybee herself. No lawyers, no drama, just a locksmith, 2 surveillance technicians, and a quiet determination that smelled of salt air and fresh beginnings. By 4 p.m., the locks had been changed, the cameras installed. One over the front porch, one discreetly tucked beneath the eave of the back patio. A little red light blinked with promise. Brittany didn't come. Neither did Ethan, But her phone did buzz at 6:12 p.m. A push notification. Instagram story. Is Brittany living well? She tapped. The video started with a glass of Chardonnay on a marble countertop, then panned to Brittany's face, perfectly lit, eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Sometimes, when you start succeeding, people try to tear you down. But I know who I am. I know what I built. And I know women like me always bounce back. People hate successful women. Resilience. Try harder. Margot watched the whole thing without blinking. She still thinks this is branding, she muttered. Viola, who had just arrived with a bundle of grocery flowers, peered over at the screen. Brand this, she said, tossing a bouquet of daisies on the kitchen counter. We're hosting a house blessing. Margot raised an eyebrow. Is that code for something? Viola grinned. It's code for mimosas, smoked salmon, and a deeply offensive playlist blasting from your speakers while we reclaim your porch. By noon the next day, 4 women from Margot's garden club were dancing barefoot to Stevie Wonder, while the scent of lemon scones floated through the house. The front door stayed wide open. The windows, too, letting everything stale out. Margot wore navy linen and pearls. Viola wore hot pink and a straw hat with a ribbon so wide it hit guests when she turned. When a neighbor strolled by and asked if they were celebrating something, Margot lifted her glass and said, "Yes, boundaries." Inside, on the corner of the dining room table, sat the latest document from Noah. Civil claim, unauthorized profit and misrepresentation. It was thorough, precise, unmistakable. Noah had pulled financial estimates for attempted rental income based on the deleted Airbnb listing, paired it with property depreciation claims and emotional damages. Brittany had never collected the money, but she'd intended to. And under Georgia law, that was enough to pursue restitution. $11,400. The formal demand was sent that night, certified mail, email, and, at Margot's quiet request, one printed copy slipped discreetly into Brittany's mailbox by a courier in a polo shirt who never even rang the doorbell. At 7:03 p.m., Margot's phone rang. Ethan. She let it buzz 4 times before answering. "Now you call," she said. "I didn't know she was going to—" "Don't," she interrupted. "You always know. You just decide not to see it." "Mom, please, if we could just meet. Just talk." "Did you tell her to list my home as a vacation rental?" "No, I swear." "But you didn't stop her." Silence. "I didn't want to make it worse," he finally said. "Worse for who?" I don't know anymore." "I do," Margot said. "Me." She hung up. Then, without ceremony, she opened her phone, found Ethan's contact and pressed block. She stood at the edge of her porch, the ocean wind tangling her hair. From here she could see the tide pulling out, a wide, calm stretch of sand left behind. Something else was coming in its place, and Brittany had just crossed into legal territory she couldn't curate. Some people hear no and take it as a challenge. Brittany took it as content. Margot was slicing lemons for a pitcher of sweet tea when her phone buzzed again. She didn't flinch. She'd turned off push notifications from all social media 2 weeks ago. But this came through email. Subject line, "Your name was mentioned in a post." Viola, perched at the counter flipping through one of Margot's older cookbooks, glanced up. "Another digital tantrum?" Margot opened the link and scrolled. Facebook, Brittany Wells shared with public. The post began with a long paragraph in bold text. "There comes a time when a woman must protect her space, even if that means standing up to outdated expectations and toxic family patterns. I will not apologize for seeking peace for my children and my marriage. Being a daughter-in-law doesn't mean being a doormat. If you've ever felt gaslit by someone who hides behind tradition, know this: you're not alone. We rise, we reclaim, we heal." Chuck her set boundaries. Char break cycles. Charm Modern Motherhood. A photo accompanied it, a candid style shot of Brittany with the children at a coastal overlook, the sun behind her. Filtered, of course. Viola made a sound somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. She's turned defamation into a Pinterest quote. She left out the forgery, the fraud, and the attempt to profit off a house she doesn't own, Margot said dryly. That part didn't fit the aesthetic, Viola muttered, sipping her tea. But don't worry. Her followers will eat it up. Truth's never been that girl's brand. Margot didn't comment. She just pressed forward on the post, sent it to Noah with a single line. Additional evidence of public misrepresentation. Less than 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Ethan, can we talk? Privately? No lawyers, just you and me. Margot stared at it for a long time, letting the words sit like ice cubes on her chest. Then she typed back, with my attorney present. 3 bubbles popped up, then disappeared. He didn't respond again. Outside, the wind was picking up. The marsh grass bowed gently, and the waves cracked a little louder against the rocks down by the dock. The beach house stayed locked. Cameras running. Systems armed. The key now sat in Margot's safe, right beside the original deed and a stack of new legal filings. Noah had already sent the final notice of restitution by courier that morning. It had been received and signed for. There were only 2 options now: payment or court. I give her 48 hours before she goes full soap opera, Viola said, rinsing strawberries in the sink. Either that, or she'll post something about reclaiming her feminine wildness through coconut oil and yoga. Margot smiled faintly but didn't speak. She carried the tea pitcher to the porch, sat in the same wicker chair she'd occupied the day her world had tilted sideways. But this time, it didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like a victory lap. She watched as a pair of gulls squabbled over a scrap of bread in the sand. The breeze curled through her linen blouse. The sky was soft and gold with late sun, and the house behind her, her house, stood proud, uninvited and untouchable. Her phone buzzed one more time, lighting up with a number she didn't recognize. Probably a burner Brittany had borrowed for one last reach around. She let it ring. Didn't answer. Didn't flinch. Instead, she poured herself a glass of tea, added a slice of lemon, and leaned back into the chair with a quiet sigh. Everything was in motion now. And when Brittany finally figured out where the line was, she'd realized she'd already crossed it. Brittany brought drama. Margot brought receipts. The courtroom was cool and quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't nervous, just watching. A few pew-style benches lined the back, filled with sleepy law interns and one bored reporter who perked up the moment the names were called. Case 11C-74, Wells versus Wells, the clerk announced. Margot stood with grace and precision, her navy suit pressed, pearls understated, hair pinned back with an elegance that didn't beg for attention. It commanded it. Noah walked beside her, calm as always, his briefcase in one hand, Margot's thick binder of evidence in the other. Brittany, on the other hand, made an entrance. She wore a white blouse, far too billowy for court, and a soft pink pencil skirt that didn't quite match her heels. Her hair was curled just enough to suggest effort, but not so much that it looked formal. Beside her, Ethan looked like a man being dragged into his own funeral. Wrinkled Oxford shirt, eyes rimmed with shame, wedding band nervously twisted round and round. The judge, a no-nonsense black woman in her 60s, with steel-gray curls and horn-rimmed glasses, looked up from the file. "Ms. Brittany Wells," she said evenly, "you're listed as the respondent here." "Yes, Your Honor," Brittany said, flashing a tight smile. "But I'd just like to clarify that this is really a family misunderstanding, more personal than legal." The judge didn't smile. "It became legal the moment you forged a document and listed someone else's home as a short-term rental." Brittany's smile faltered. That wasn't my intention. Noah stood. Your Honor, if I may, we have printed documentation from the Airbnb listing, dated correspondence, notarized deed, and a signed statement from a county records clerk who flagged a forged filing submitted under Ms. Wells's name. He passed the folder to the bailiff. The judge flipped through it. Her brow lifted ever so slightly. Coastal gem, huh? Brittany tried to laugh. It was just a branding term. Sit down, Ms. Wells, the judge said. Brittany sat, her jaw clenched. Noah remained standing. Additionally, we have the original deed, showing my client, Margot Elise Wells, as the sole owner of the Tybee Island property. No co-ownership, no lease agreement, no transfer of title, and no consent to the Airbnb listing. The judge looked to Margot. Do you have anything to add, ma'am? Margot stood, calm, grounded. Only that I built that home with my late husband, paid for it in full, maintained it for over 20 years, and watched it be treated like a photo op by someone who was never entitled to more than a guest towel. A murmur rippled from the gallery. Ethan said nothing. Not a word. He looked at his lap, like there was something written there he didn't want to read. Brittany suddenly straightened. Your Honor, this is character assassination. I was just trying to create income for our family, and I was led to believe we had rights to that house. The judge's gaze didn't waver. By whom? Brittany hesitated. My husband, Ethan. Ethan looked up, stunned. What? Margot raised a single eyebrow but didn't speak. The judge flipped through the documents again, slowly. When she looked back up, her voice was firm. The court finds that Ms. Brittany Wells knowingly misrepresented property ownership, submitted fraudulent documentation, and attempted to profit from a home she had no legal claim to. Brittany's face flushed red. This is insane. I have children. Then I suggest you act like someone they should look up to, the judge snapped. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Brittany sat back like she'd been slapped. The judge continued. Restitution in the amount of $11,400 is hereby ordered, along with a cease and desist on all further claims to the property in question. Additionally, any future filings related to the Tybee Island home by the respondent will be considered under fraud review. Bang. Gavel. Done. Margot didn't smile, not even when Noah gently closed his folder with a click of finality. As they stood to leave, Brittany hissed under her breath. You'll regret this. Margot turned, met her gaze full on. No, she said quietly. I regret nothing. Ethan tried to catch her eye as they passed. She didn't give him the dignity of a glance. Outside the courthouse, the sun was high, the air thick with jasmine and justice. Noah exhaled. Well, that went cleanly. Margot nodded once. Now let's make it permanent. Some victories are measured in dollars, others in silence. The check arrived on a gray Wednesday morning, enclosed in a plain envelope marked Certified Funds, Court-Ordered Restitution. No apology, no note. Just a number typed on a line. $11,400. Margot stood at her writing desk, holding it between her fingers like a leaf she didn't care to keep. She half expected it to burn through her skin, the way wrong money always does. Viola, lounging on the settee with a crossword and her third cup of coffee, looked up. That, the blood money? Margot nodded once. Came from Ethan's joint account, not hers. Well, Viola said, setting down her mug, at least he's finally paying for something. Margot folded the check neatly into an envelope already addressed to the Savannah Women's Housing Initiative. She sealed it with one firm press of her thumb. Viola watched her walk it to the mail pile. Not even tempted to keep a little bit for revenge champagne? Margot gave her a small smile. I'd rather buy someone else a front door. 2 days later, Brittany went online. Her Facebook feed lit up with a new post, long, dramatic, heavy with ellipses. There's nothing lower than someone using the legal system to tear down a family. I stood for love. I stood for peace. And I've been punished for it, but I'll rise. I always rise. Truth will out. Stay kind within an hour. The comments rolled in. Fuss Southern Mama 77. Girl, just stop. H Truth and T Savannah. You literally forged a document. Coastal Law Guy. Court records are public, Brittany. Realty Chatter 912. Can't rent integrity on Airbnb. By evening, she'd turned off comments. Ethan, for once, didn't defend her. He didn't repost, didn't explain. The small digital ripple that followed, his quiet unfollow, was noticed by exactly the kind of people who whispered in brunch lines and neighborhood groups. Viola read the gossip aloud like it was poetry. Oh look, one of her mommy influencer friends commented, "Silence speaks volumes." Let it, Margot said, slicing into a peach tart. I'm tired of listening to her noise. A week later, they went to brunch at the Collins house, a leafy patio shaded by crepe myrtles and ceiling fans that hummed above white-clothed tables. Viola ordered 2 mimosas before they'd even unfolded their napkins. To justice with a side of citrus, Viola toasted. Margot clinked her glass. To peace, that can't be bought. The sound of glass meeting glass was light, final, perfect. Halfway through brunch, Noah appeared at the corner of the patio, carrying a small manila envelope. He was dressed down, no tie, sleeves rolled. Thought I'd drop this by, he said, smiling faintly. Viola squinted at him. You ever rest? Not when people like Brittany Wells keep me in business. He handed the envelope to Margot. You'll like this. Inside was a printout from a local blog, Coastal Georgia Real Estate Watch. The headline read, Savannah Court sides with homeowner in Airbnb deed fraud case. Widowed etiquette instructor wins landmark restitution order. Margot blinked once. Landmark? It's the first of its kind here, Noah said. Sets precedent for private homeowners. You might have just helped half the coast. Viola grinned. Well, I'll drink to that. The article was brief but biting. It detailed the fake listing, the forgery, the ruling. It ended with one quote from an unnamed source close to the case. She didn't fight to win. She fought to set the record straight. Brittany's name trended locally for 3 hours. Not in admiration, just curiosity. Then her Instagram disappeared. Her Facebook went private. The curated life she'd constructed evaporated in silence, leaving behind only cached posts and speculation. For the first time in months, Margot's phone stayed quiet. No buzzing, no alerts, no venom disguised as virtue. The night after, she sat on her porch again, the sound of the tide whispering just beyond the dunes. The sky glowed lavender and gold. She opened her journal and wrote 3 lines. Peace is not passive. It is reclaimed, not given. And it costs exactly $11,400. She closed the book and smiled into the dark. The story wasn't over, but Brittany's part in it was. Major twist number 3. Some endings aren't cruel, they're careful. The morning was bright and soft when Margot sat down with her lawyer. The kind of Savannah morning that made you forget for a moment that anything ugly ever grew beneath the magnolias. The conference room at Holloway and Bird smelled faintly of lemon wax and old mahogany. Her new attorney, one she'd known through the Historic Society, sat across from her, fountain pen poised, a pot of coffee between them. Viola occupied the chair beside her, wearing oversized sunglasses and a look that dared anyone to object to her presence. Margot opened her planner, the same one she'd carried for decades, and unfolded a single page of handwritten notes. I'd like to make several updates to my estate, she said calmly. It's time. The attorney nodded. We can begin with the primary asset, the Tybee property? Yes, Margot said. The beach house is to be transferred in full upon my passing to the Tybee Island Historic Preservation Trust. No heirs, no co-ownership, no loopholes. It will belong to the community. Viola smiled faintly. That's poetic. It's practical, Margot replied. No one can sell it. No one can exploit it. They'll maintain it, restore it, and preserve its character. It'll stand long after all this foolishness is forgotten. The attorney's pen scratched softly across the page. And for your son? Margot inhaled, her expression unreadable. Ethan is to receive a letter. Nothing else. Would you like to dictate it now? I already have. She slid an envelope across the table, sealed in navy wax. The attorney hesitated, then took it gently, placing it on top of the growing stack of documents. Viola leaned over just enough to catch Margot's eye. You sure you don't want me to proofread it? You know I'd polish the sting. Margot chuckled softly. It doesn't need polish. It needs truth. And Mrs. Brittany Wells? The attorney asked, cautious. Margot's eyes flickered just once. She isn't in it. The room fell still for a heartbeat too long. Then Viola exhaled, muttering, Hallelujah. The attorney cleared his throat. And for the remainder of your estate? Margot tapped her pen thoughtfully against her planner. A modest endowment for the Savannah Women's Housing Initiative, in memory of my husband. Personal effects divided among friends, as listed. Viola Harris. She gestured to her companion. Will serve as executor. Viola nearly choked on her water. Me. You'll do it properly, Margot said, smiling. And you'll keep everyone honest. I always do, Viola murmured, straightening in her seat. It took 2 hours to finalize the details. Every paragraph was read twice, each clause reviewed for precision. Margot initialed each page with deliberate care, the pen gliding across paper with a steady confidence. When they reached the signature line at the end, the attorney slid the final document toward her. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Wells. Margot picked up the pen again. Her reflection gleamed faintly in the polished wood of the table. She signed her name in elegant loops. Margot Elise Wells. Then she added the date, drew a careful period, and pressed the nib to the page one final time, as if underlining the last sentence of her life's most personal story. There, she said softly. Done? Viola raised her glass of water like a toast. To closure. Margot met her gaze. To peace. By that evening, a courier delivered a sealed copy to her home. She placed it on her desk beside her husband's framed photograph, the one from their 25th anniversary, both of them barefoot in the sand, laughing. She rested her fingers briefly on the glass. I hope you'd approve, she whispered. Later that night, she sat in her study, the soft hum of crickets seeping in through the open window. She addressed one final envelope in her tidy script. To my son, Ethan. Inside, she tucked a copy of the new will, a notarized letter, and a single line written in her own hand at the bottom of the first page. When you lose what you took for granted, sometimes that's the inheritance you've earned. She sealed it and rang for the courier. Deliver this tomorrow morning, she instructed. Signature required. He nodded and left quietly. When the door shut behind him, Margot exhaled. Slow, deep, final. She turned off the lamp, letting the dusk spill across her walls like watercolor. The house felt lighter already. From the porch, Viola's voice called up. You done signing away the past? Margot smiled. No, she said, stepping into the warm night air. I've just signed over the future. Some apologies aren't spoken to be forgiven. They're spoken so someone can finally hear themselves say it. The knock came just after dusk. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to break the rhythm of the ocean wind brushing against the porch screens. Margot looked up from her journal. She hadn't been writing. just holding the pen, letting the last of the day settle into the corners of the beach house. She opened the door slowly. Ethan stood on the top step, shoulders hunched, a grocery store paper bag in one hand, and the expression of a man who had run out of places to hide. His eyes were bloodshot but clear. His shirt was wrinkled, like he'd been sitting in his car too long deciding whether to come. "I brought lemonade," he said, holding out the bag. Margot stepped aside without a word. He walked in, slower than usual, as if unsure what gravity would do to him in this house now. The silence stretched like wet rope as he placed the bottle on the kitchen counter and leaned both hands against the marble. "I read the letter," he said quietly. Margot nodded once, arms folded gently. "Good. I I didn't know it got this far," Ethan added, voice strained. Margot's eyes didn't blink. "You didn't want to know." He looked down. The truth sat between them like a loaded suitcase. "I thought if I kept quiet, it would fix itself. Or fade. Or not be mine to deal with." She crossed the kitchen slowly, poured 2 glasses of the lemonade he brought, handed him one. "But it was yours. It always was. Not the house. The silence." Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched. "She's leaving," he said after a pause. Margot didn't react. No gasp, no triumph. Just a calm tilt of her head. "She says she needs space, that I didn't protect her, that this family is toxic." Margot took a sip of lemonade, let it sit in her mouth before swallowing. "She's half right." He flinched. "Mom?" "I'm not attacking her," she said gently. "But I won't pretend she was a victim of anything but her own ambition." "And you?" Ethan exhaled, almost in a whisper. "I don't even know who I've been these last few years." "You've been afraid," she said. "Afraid of confrontation, of change, of standing between 2 women and choosing the right one to listen to." He nodded. A beat passed, then another. "I don't expect you to fix it," he said. I didn't want to disappear from your life without telling you the truth. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." Margot looked at him. Not as a child. Not even as a son. Just a man trying to figure out if his apology had come too late. She pulled open the screen door with one hand and nodded toward the porch. "Come sit." They settled into the wicker chairs side by side, facing the horizon. The beach stretched out in quiet stripes of silver and sand. A few lanterns glowed faintly on porches farther down the road. The tide was out. Neither spoke for a while. Ethan leaned back, his glass sweating in his hand. "Dad used to say this view made the whole world feel smaller." Margot smiled faintly. "He said that the first week we owned this place, you were 8. You asked if that meant we could touch the stars from here." Ethan chuckled under his breath, his voice catching. "I remember." Then, softly, he wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt and said, "I miss him." Margot didn't touch his arm. Didn't try to solve the ache. She just sat with it. "I do too," she whispered. The air thickened around them, not heavy, just honest. For once, Ethan didn't need anything from her. And Margot didn't ask for anything back. They just breathed the same air, looked out at the same horizon, and sat with all the things that couldn't be undone. Inside the house, her journal remained open on the desk, untouched. But the final page, blank, waited for whatever came next. Some homes are inherited. Others are earned every day you choose not to leave them behind. Margot woke with the breeze, not an alarm, not a memory. Just the soft rustle of curtains and the salt-sweet breath of the ocean gliding through her open bedroom windows like a whispered invitation. The sky outside was lavender and pearl, the tide low and gentle. The kind of morning that never begged to be captured, only lived. She stretched slowly beneath the light cotton sheet, one hand brushing the edge of the pillow beside her. The house was still and warm, not lonely, just hers. Downstairs, she heard movement, drawers opening, the soft clink of mugs. Viola was already up. Of course, by the time Margot padded out to the kitchen in her robe, barefoot and calm, Viola had brewed strong coffee, poured it into a thermos, and was packing a tote bag with 2 folding chairs, a blanket, and a tin of still warm cheddar biscuits wrapped in foil. "I thought today might call for a sunrise sit," Viola said, tying her scarf with one hand. "Something about watching the light come up from sea level makes the rest of the world feel manageable." Margot poured herself a cup and smiled. "You read my mind." They didn't speak much as they made their way down to the shore. Just the sound of footsteps in sand and the creak of canvas as the chairs unfolded into place. The 2 women sat side by side, wrapped in sweaters, facing the slow unfurling of gold across the water. It was quiet, but not empty. The kind of quiet where you hear everything: gulls wheeling above, waves shushing against the shore, a breeze that smelled like jasmine and driftwood. They sipped their coffee, watched the sky change, watched the water sparkle. Eventually, a young couple walking hand in hand with iced lattes passed by. The woman slowed, eyes fixed on the beach house perched proudly behind them, the blue shutters, the flower boxes spilling over, the porch swing gently swaying in the wind. "Excuse me," she said, pausing. "Is that your house?" Margot glanced over, nodded once. "It's stunning," the woman said. "We were wondering if it's a rental. I've never seen anything like it. It looks sacred." Viola snorted softly into her thermos. Margot smiled, eyes warm. "It's not for rent." The couple nodded, sensing something more than just ownership in her tone. They walked on, hand in hand, their voices fading behind them. Viola turned her head just enough. "You could have added, or for sale, for good measure." "I didn't need to," Margot said. They felt it. Later, back on the porch, the day rising around them like a second cup of coffee, Margot pulled her journal from the side table. She opened to the last blank page. No drama, no confessions, just a soft final entry. "Peace isn't something you find, it's something you protect. And sometimes, it's something you rebuild, board by board, after others try to claim the walls you stood inside of first." She signed her initials at the bottom, then closed the book. Viola reached over and placed her hand atop it. "So, what now?" Margot looked out at the horizon. The water shimmered. The gulls were already beginning to stir. "Now," she said, "I take a vacation." "Where to?" "Here." Viola grinned. "Smart woman." Margot leaned back in the chair, her robe brushing against the wicker. The sun was up now, full and bright. The porch was still. The house behind her was quiet but alive, with memory, with presence, with herself. The windows gleamed. The garden bloomed. The air smelled like fresh lemons and second chances. And for the first time in a long, long while, Margot Wells didn't feel like she had to prove anything to anyone. Not her worth, not her place, not her name. She sipped her coffee, eyes closed, letting the sound of the waves finish what the courts and conversations never quite could. They wanted to erase me. Instead, I left my name in every wall.